Now that we have a basic understanding of Twinmotion, it's time to come back into Revit, and I'm going to teach you in this video how to link a project between Twinmotion and Revit. One of the really nice features that we have here is that as long as Twinmotion and Revit are installed on the same computer, if I make changes inside of Revit, they'll show up automatically in Twinmotion. Let me show you how this works. Now, first of all, make sure you have the right versions of either software. Currently, I'm using 25 version of Revit with a 24 version of Twinmotion, and it seems as though Twinmotion needs to be one version behind Revit at all times. Otherwise, they aren't going to sync up the way that I'm about to show. But if you do have the right versions, you'll go to your View tab. Make sure to open up a 3D view like I have here. View tab, Twinmotion, hit the drop down, and you can simply tell it to open in Twinmotion. And some of these other buttons like Auto Sync and Synchronize, this will allow us to have an ongoing connection once the project is open. So if I select Auto Sync, that simply means that the changes that I make here will automatically show up, and if I don't hit Auto Sync, then I need to push Synchronize and push the changes through whenever I've made modifications to Revit. If for whatever reason you can't get either of these options to work, then go ahead and use the Export to Datasmith file. And that simply gives you a file out of Revit that can then be loaded or imported into Twinmotion. Of course, the way it is when you export is the way it will always be, so you won't have any ability to make ongoing changes. Okay, and after you've initially hit Open in Twinmotion, this is what you'll see. Twinmotion will load, and then it will give you the option: do you want to place this house or this object file inside of a new project or inside of some existing environment within Twinmotion? We're going to go with a new project, and I have actually loaded two projects for you, and that one didn't do anything. Okay, let's try this one. New project, and this is what it should do. There we are, and you can see that it brought in the house we were looking at. It brought in all the materials. It brought in a ground plane. If I go back into Revit, you can see that there is a ground plane here and that I must have dirt assigned to it. I actually don't. Well, by default, it must have known to make that into dirt. So maybe that's why we see some nice brown ground there. Okay, otherwise, I want to show you what happens when I load this project in, which I thought that I had done, but we'll try it one more time. I guess I won't be needing this version open. Okay, and I tried to close this. Okay, there we go. New project. Here it comes. This is the problem that you're going to have if your materials don't link up properly. And I tried to explain this in an earlier video. This is where I had you go to Stats and then Quality Setup and then Settings. I want to show that you can actually get there just by going to Edit and then Preferences. Takes you to the same place. And then remember, we went down here to Direct Link and we set up a location where all of the materials that are being carried over could get dumped into. And it doesn't always work, is what I'm finding. Okay, it was a great idea. I was glad that I found some temporary solution, but sometimes this is just how it's going to be. Your model's going to come in, it's going to be completely white, and I'll show you through the process of some of the upcoming videos that it's really not that big of an issue. It's not a big deal. It'd be nice if we had all those other materials, but we can just swap them out quickly here in Twinmotion anyways. So with this other project that has a ground plane, here's what I'd like to show. First of all, I can select anything, and as long as I have my scene open from down here, I'll get this great big long list of every single object that came over inside of, or came over from Revit, and it will all be bundled together inside of a folder. It's kind of a pain actually that I have to scroll all the way up to get to the top of that folder, and here it is. I usually like to just rename it. You always have big long names. I'm just going to call it Revit file. And you can collapse it. That's nice. Then you don't have that massive list. But again, if you select anything, it takes you down all the way down on this dialog box to whatever object you select, and it's hard to get back to the top. So my solution for that has been select something in the background or on the ground, and the starting landscape and the starting ground, you can see that's what they're called over here, they both show up above the starting Revit file in this list. So I can simply go down in the list by clicking on something in the model, and then go to the top of the list by clicking on something in the background, and then I can just collapse this. Okay, but it is a nice feature to be able to see all the separate objects independently, to be able to click on them. You can hide them, you can delete them, whatever you need to do. Just keep in mind that if you hide them, you're going to need to find them again in this list. So things that you want to hide often, you might want to create a new subfolder for. You can even pull things outside of this folder, because you've got the Revit folder right now. If you want to create a brand new one, you can say create new subcontainer, which will create a folder inside of that one, or go up here to the scene graph and create a new subcontainer here, and then you've got another folder that you can drag things into. And I often do this as I'm placing things like trees or any content from over here. Okay, the next thing that I want to mention has to do with this ground plane and the fact that I probably won't leave it turned on. I've already got this nice landscape here, this starting ground, and better yet, I'll probably bring in my own version of the ground through vegetation, landscapes, and then I'm going to pick either rocky grasslands or flat. This is the only way that you can actually sculpt anything that you want to here in Twinmotion on the ground, because this is going to be a flat plane no matter what. I can't change it here. And this one is also just a flat plane. I can't change that. So if I want to do any ground sculpting, I have to add one of these in. And I'm not going to sculpt it in this video. I'm just going to show you what will happen when I pull it in. Okay, let's go ahead with the flat one. And I just simply drag it and wait. Okay, and there it is. And it more or less means that that starting landscape, I don't need that one anymore. So I'm going to, again, click here. Remember, that takes me to the top of the list. And then I can just hide the starting ground. Sorry, I'm using these two interchangeably. I keep saying starting landscape, but remember, that's just the mountains in the back. It's the starting ground that I can now turn off because I've got this flat landscape. Where is that flat landscape? Well, it's down here. And I'm going to pull that up above, at least above my Revit file, right? Starting base, I don't really need any of this. This is in a previous video was that little mound with a sphere on top, so I probably could pull that one down or just delete it out entirely. Anyways, now that I have this, it's going to try to interact, or interact may not be the best word, but it's going to conflict with the ground plane that's already in here. Now that's not such a bad thing, because I could take the very grass material that's been applied and I could apply it to this. But I've just found, wouldn't it be better if we simply turn off this topo surface, other than the fact that I can see grass now inside. Oh, actually, I don't think that was inside. Oops. If you do that, I accidentally hit R, just push R again. That's just a reflection of the glass. We need to change that glass material. We'll do that in another video, but now that I have this ground plane, it may or may not be at the proper height. So I can just move it up and down. And whatever I have selected is moving. It's not my ground plane, so I'm going to hit undo. Let's try that again. Select the ground plane, move it up, move it down. If you want to plug in a number, then just hover until, don't click, but just hover until that number box shows up, and then I could say -1. Okay, and that did -1 what? Whatever the units are is what that just changed. Let's go to Edit, Preferences, and we'll find out. Unit System. I'd rather go with feet or inches. Try it again. I can go -1 foot. And then another nice thing you can do is open up the XYZ, and then you can see how the coordinates here relate back to the gizmo and its colors. So blue would be the way that I can adjust this vertically. So if I want to go -4.27 to put it back where it was, then that jumps up another foot. Okay, and this is just a great way to have a ground plane in here that is infinite, but also very editable. The only time we have a problem is going to be with your driveway. Oops, over here. So if you have a driveway that was on the topo solid that we brought in from Revit, it's now lost or it's been turned off, and actually it doesn't have to be. That's the good news. You could keep the driveway, and you probably want to because it has nice crisp edges. So there may be a driveway coming out like this with those good crisp edges. You can actually keep it and you can move it independently. So I could set it right on top of this ground plane. And what I mean by that is, just because the Revit model is all one big file doesn't mean these pieces can't be moved independently. So pretend that I had a hold of a driveway. I would just move it up or down until it sat perfectly on my ground plane. So that's kind of my suggestion for you. And just to finalize my instruction here, let me go back into Revit and oh, there we go. And just show you that in a site plan, here's a driveway. The way that you would create that would be to go to Massing and Site. If you already have a topo solid, you would subdivide your driveway on top of the topo solid. And I'm sorry, I'm going to do this just really quickly. It's the last thing I'll do in this video, so if you don't need this part, you can skip ahead. But I'm just going to show it anyways. I'm going to create a topo solid from Sketch, and we just simply want some massive plane. Or again, you could just do the driveway alone, but if I create a sketch, there it is. And if I want to put a driveway on top of it, I simply subdivide the topo solid. And then in this case, I'm just going to pick these lines because I've already got a driveway drawn. Okay, now this won't be perfect. But I'll show you what's going to happen. Okay, here's the topo solid that was created. Here's the driveway. It's always about a foot thick. And even though it's not at the right height, it doesn't matter because I can change that in Twinmotion. So now we go back to Twinmotion. And you can see that everything did indeed show up here. There's the driveway. Here's the part that I wouldn't need. So you can either just turn it off or delete it out. Here's the driveway. I'll simply move that up or down. And in my case, it's going to be a problem with the starting terrain or starting ground, so I would turn that off. And in this particular file, I hadn't yet placed a landscape, so I'll do it here. And then you can see how this will all be finalized. I'll move, I'm going to select the right thing. I'm just going to move that new landscape down to about the bottom of the stairs, bottom of the driveway. And now I'll take this driveway and place it to where it just pokes up above the grass. And if moving it with the gizmo isn't good enough, then just plug in the right number. And there you go. Great way to get started.